You settle in, and the light in your room narrows to a small golden shape. A single flame stands where darkness once pressed close. You can hear it more than see it. At first, the faint hiss of wick, the whisper of wax softening. The air feels slower around it, and somewhere in the back of your thoughts, you wonder how many people through the centuries have done exactly what you're doing now, sitting still, watching a candle breathe. The gentle twist comes quietly, almost unnoticed, the idea that every flicker of that flame holds a memory, that what looks like a small, private light has carried empires, monasteries, lonely sailors, and poets through the night. The candle is not just wax and wick. It is time itself, burning at a human pace. Stay with me. We'll follow that slow light backward. In a moment, you'll see how something so fragile could guide whole generations, could measure life before clocks learned to tick. For now, breathe in softly, as if drawing the scent of warm beeswax and faint smoke. Imagine that this same breath connects you to an ancient roomstone walls, low ceiling, and a candle set on a rough table. Someone is writing by it, a scribe, perhaps, dipping a quill. Outside, the night presses with the same patience it has tonight. As you let your shoulders loosen, picture the centuries leaning closer to this flame. A queen leaning in to read a secret letter, a child tracing shadows on the wall, a monk praying through the long winter hours while wax drips like minutes into a brass holder. Every drop is a story, every shimmer a thought. You and I can walk among them without hurry. The candle, though small, has a way of surviving endings. Long before electricity, long before the word cozy ever existed, people trusted candles to mark safety. The lighting of one was permission to rest. Its snuffing out was a promise of dawn. And here you are now, in another quiet room, centuries later, with the same soft light keeping you company. We'll begin with its earliest shape, the first sparks of fire, tamed by hand. When light was a new idea, not yet an invention. We'll drift through temples, workshops, kitchens, and ships, through tallow, smoke, and beeswax perfume, through nights when the world seemed held together by a few trembling flames. And as we go, I'll keep the light low and the words slower, so your mind can wander kindly. For now, let the candle's glow settle behind your eyes. There's nothing you must do. The story will move at its own breathing pace, and somewhere inside the glow, the past is waiting. In a moment, we'll begin at the beginning, when the first candle wasn't wax at all, but a spark cradled in fear and wonder. The story of the candle begins not in wax or wick, but in fear of the dark. Imagine the first people crouched near a dying fire, watching its glow sink into the coals. The night around them breathed like an animal, full of unknown sounds. One ember slipped loose, still burning, and someone, perhaps a child, cupped it in a hollow stone, blowing gently until it steadied. That small cradle of fire, tender and brave, was the ancestor of every candle that has ever flickered since. You can almost see the hands around it, trembling yet protective, the red pulse mirrored in their eyes. In those earliest centuries, light was sacred because it could vanish. The first lamps were made of shells, bone, or soft clay, filled with fat rendered from the hunt. A strand of plant fiber floated like a wick upon the oil. The smoke was thick and the scent heavy, but for the first time humans could stretch the day a little longer. Stay with me here. Imagine that moment when darkness no longer dictated every thought. The flame did not roar, it whispered. It told them there was another way to live. Thousands of years drifted like smoke. In Egypt, narrow reeds were dipped in tallow and dried in the sun until they burned slow and steady. In Rome, lamp makers pressed their marks into clay molds, shaping channels for oil. But the candle, as we know it, solid, portable, gentle, took form quietly. Some say sailors in the Aegean melted sheep fat into carved horns. Others think monks in Asia discovered that wax from bees held its shape and fragrance longer. Either way, the candle's secret was patience. It asked nothing but air, offered nothing but light. Picture a dusk in an ancient village. The roofs are low thatched, and the scent of cooked grain hangs in the air. Someone carries a small flame from house to house, lighting wicks from a single source, so every home glows with the same heartbeat. You might feel the warmth of that sharing, a ritual older than any written prayer. Even now, the simple act of lighting one candle from another carries something of that first kindness and inheritance of brightness. And yet, the candle was never only practical. In temples, priests lined their altars with rows of wax lights, whose tears pooled like honey at their feet. They believed the flame bridged this world and the next, a soft stairway for the soul. In China, red candles burned at weddings to bless new beginnings. In northern lands, tallow lamps flickered through long winters, as if reminding people that the sun had not forgotten them. Each culture shaped its own silence around the flame. As you breathe now, imagine those rooms. Hear the faint crackle, the sigh of melted wax. A candle has a sound. If you listen closely, something between a sigh and a thought forming. I used to sit by one as a child, tracing shadows on the wall, pretending they were stories moving across time. Perhaps you did too, or something like it. The way a flame bends when you exhale near it, yet refuses to die. That is history teaching persistence. When beeswax appeared, the candle's world changed scent. Unlike tallow, it burned clean, releasing the sweetness of summer fields where bees had gathered sunlight, grain by grain. Monasteries prized it. You can almost hear the footsteps of monks collecting comb, melting wax in copper pots, and pouring it into simple molds. Each stick of light represented labor, devotion, and quiet hope that the hours of copying manuscripts would not be swallowed by darkness. The medieval candle was a companion of thought. Scholars hunched over parchment until dawn while their candles shortened. Each drop of wax a reminder that knowledge, too, requires sacrifice. But there was no sadness in it, only rhythm. The candle would end, another would be lit, and the work would continue. In a moment you'll see how this slow burning became a symbol for continuity itself. But stay with me a little longer in that scriptorium. You can feel the chill stone walls, smell ink, and see the halo of light that protects the words from vanishing. Centuries later, households across Europe kept candles as measures of time. A mark scratched into the wax showed an hour's passing. Lovers promised to return before the candle burns out. Mothers soothed children by candlelight, telling them the moon borrowed its glow from these small earthly stars. Even kings feared a dark corridor and carried a candlestick like any other soul. Light was the great equalizer. In its presence, all faces softened. By the 17th century, chandlers, candlemakers filled towns with their craft. The air in their shops shimmered with heat and perfume. They mixed tallow, beeswax, sometimes the rare spermaceti from Wales, pouring and cooling, tying and trimming. To walk into such a place was to enter a golden fog of scent, honey, smoke, and salt. I imagine you might close your eyes there, letting the warmth brush your cheeks. Every candle they made contained a promise to someone unseen, a promise of comfort. Think now of how different the world looked by candlelight. The corners melted away, leaving only what mattered. The face before you, the page, the cup. Candlelight edits the world gently. Perhaps that's why painters loved it, why writers found their rhythm in its unsteady glow. It slows thought to the speed of breathing. And even now, in a world of instant brightness, we return to it to remember calm. There is a quiet twist here. The candle has always been an act of surrender as much as control. You light it to see, yet every second it dies to serve you. A small daily offering. The ancients might have called it sacred sacrifice. We might call it focus, mindfulness, or simple peace. The meaning changes, but the feeling stays. You can sense that truth whenever you watch wax pool and harden. Again, creation and ending, sharing the same gesture as the centuries drifted toward modern light. The candle refused extinction. Gas, filament, electricity, all came and went in surges of invention, yet still we keep candles on our tables. We light them not for need, but for memory. A birthday wish, a vigil, a quiet battle, small altars to the past. The flame's language has not aged. It still says, "You are here. The dark is kind tonight." Now, as you sit with this story, picture your own candle again. Its flame steady, breathing with you. Around it lie the shadows of every age we've passed through: the cave ember, the temple lamp, the monk's taper, the chandlery haze. They're all folded inside this single light. The candle's history is not a line. It's a circle of warmth repeating itself in every quiet room. So rest your eyes a little. Let the scene fade into golden blur. In the next chapter, we'll follow how this humble object shaped not only nights, but time itself. How candles became clocks and prayers, instruments of devotion and the rhythm of sleep. But for now, let the wick's slow glow linger. The night outside is older than you think, yet it listens kindly. The flame leans, sighs, and waits. When you think of a candle, you might imagine it standing still, burning quietly in the corner of a room. Yet, in truth, the candle was once a measure of motion itself, a clock that melted its way through the hours with a patience only time could understand. And in the centuries before, ticking gears and pendulums, people watched wax instead of watching hands, reading the night by the slow descent of a flame, learning the art of waiting. In medieval households, a candle clock was common, a tall taper scored with lines or pins that would drop with each inch of melted wax, a soft way to measure an hour's passing, useful for prayers, curfews, or lovers' meetings. And each flicker was a whisper of time slipping gently away. Imagine it now, a narrow room of stone, a chill that clings to your sleeves, and one long candle burning beside a brass bowl, its surface catching the faint reflections of gold, the scent of tallow, faint but familiar, and a monk in the corner, murmuring psalms as the pins fall one by one, the sound softer than rain on a shutter. In that rhythm, people found comfort. The candle did not rush them. It simply reminded them that all things had their pace. The flame became a teacher of patience, a slow companion for those who worked or prayed through long nights. And soon the candle's light came to mark the cycle of human activity, itself wake labor. Rest long before factories and clocks would divide the day into mechanical portions. Even cities seemed to breathe by candlelight. The market's last vendors packed their stalls when the candles burned to half. The inns glowed faintly until the candles guttered to their ends, and in royal halls servants trimmed wicks through banquets, so the light would not fade before the last toast. There is a gentle poetry in that, the wax descending like the sun, the wick curling like a crescent moon. Stay with me here, and imagine the 18th century, when chandlers' windows gleamed with rows of freshly poured candles straight, white, perfect, their smooth skin promising both beauty and order. In these times, light was labor, and candles were wealth. A household's prosperity could be counted not only in coins, but in how many candles they could afford to burn in a single evening. The poor relied on rushlight's thin reeds, dipped in fat that burned fast and smoky, casting uneven shadows that danced across low ceilings, while the rich ordered beeswax tapers by the dozen, their glow pure and steady, filling drawing rooms with the perfume of honey. Yet beneath that difference, all shared the same small ritual, the moment of striking a flame and watching it catch. For a few heartbeats, everyone was equal before the trembling birth of light. There is something timeless in that gesture, don't you think? A match struck today hums with the same promise as flint on iron centuries ago. And as you picture these scenes, let your mind slow, let your breathing match the flame's gentle lean. In a moment, you'll see why this matters. The candle not only measured hours, it shaped the very rhythm of social life. In monasteries, candles burned in strict intervals, 7 times each date, to signal prayers and songs. In homes, one candle might mark supper, another bedtime, and in ships at sea, candles were rationed by watches. A way to hold on to the notion of day and night, when the horizon was endless. Each place had its ritual, each flame a silent bell tolling through time. Later, when mechanical clocks became common, people still trusted candles more intimately. A clock might tell you the hour, but a candle told you how it felt to live through it, the warmth, the scent, the hush that filled the room as wax folded on itself. Even scholars who wrote by the new clockwork lights of early cities often kept a single candle beside them, calling it the friend of thought. And perhaps that is what it was, a reminder that light could still be personal, not uniform or unblinking. When electricity arrived, the candle became less about necessity and more about memory. But centuries earlier, it was still a living measure of faith. In churches, tall candles called votives burned in quiet clusters, each one carrying a whispered hope. Pilgrims lit them for healing, for safe travels, for love returned. The wax pooled and hardened into strange, beautiful shapes, layers of devotion made visible. If you've ever watched wax cooling, you'll know the feeling. It's like time deciding to rest. The candle was both flame and sculpture, both motion and stillness, both offering and comfort. In every corner of history, its presence softened the edges of human striving. The scholar's candle, the sailor's candle, the mother's candle, they all told the same story. You are not alone in the dark. And now, as you sit with this, Imagine yourself in one of those old rooms again. Perhaps a London workshop or a small cottage in France, and the candle is burning low. The wax has curved into a small pool, trembling, almost done. The air carries the smell of salt and brass, of work nearly finished. You can hear distant footsteps, a kettle cooling, and the soft sigh of wind through shutters. The candle's flame bends, rights itself, bends again. In that rhythm lies an ancient comfort, the same rhythm that guided prayers, measured nights, and counted the hours of love and loss. And so we understand that the candle is not only an object of history, but a teacher of peace, showing that even as time melts away, light remains gentle, unhurried, kind. The next time you watch a flame, perhaps you'll see it not as something fleeting, but as something returning, the same glow that once timed a prayer, now keeping you company as you drift toward sleep. By the time candles reached the great cities of the late Middle Ages, they had already become threads binding work, worship, and wonder together. And in those bustling streets, you could tell the hour not by bells alone, but by the color of the light falling through windows. At dawn it was thin and blue, at noon white and unforgiving. But at evening, when shutters closed and the world turned inward, the light grew golden and alive again, summoned by the humble match or flint that birthed the nightly calm. Candles became the first chore of dusk. A child might be sent to fetch the taper, a mother to shield the flame from wind, and fathers or craftsmen to trim wicks so smoke would not spoil the air. The day's noise softened as the flame bloomed, and its warmth touched the timber beams like memory itself returning. You can imagine that slow transformation of light, the way rooms seemed to shrink to human scale, the wide world distilled into a circle of flickering gold. There was comfort in knowing the dark could be tamed with something so small, and that each household held its own sun. And in the centuries that followed, that light began to travel not just within homes, but along trade routes, carried in ships and caravans, linking distant cultures by the shared hunger for gentle illumination. Merchants in Venice sold wax from the hives of distant lands, their warehouses thick with the smell of honey and salt. In the east, delicate candles of rice bran and insect wax flickered through paper screens, and travelers from Europe spoke of their steady, tranquil burn, how they released no smoke and left the air pure as morning dew. Light had found many languages, yet all whispered the same thing: rest, peace, safety. There's something soothing in that thought, that while kings argued and armies marched, ordinary people still paused each night to light a flame, the same small ritual of care repeating across continents. Stay with me here. We'll walk down a narrow alley in London around the year 1600, when the city's air hung thick with chimney, soot, and candlelight trembled in every window pane. Inside a modest home, a woman sits by the hearth, twisting scraps of cloth into makeshift wicks, dipping them in tallow melted from yesterday's roast. She hums quietly, perhaps thinking of her children asleep above. Each candle she makes will last only a few hours, yet in those hours they will give her family a sense of calm that the smoky streets cannot. Across the city, chandlers mix wax and oil in vast iron pots, stirring with wooden rods, while apprentices pour the liquid into molds tied with string. The smell is heavy but honest, fire and patience. By candlelight they work to create more light. It's almost poetic, the cycle of it. And above the rooftops, the tower clock tolls the hour. But for most people, time is still measured by the flame's slow sinking. A candle an inch shorter means supper nearly done, a story nearly finished, a thought ready to close. There's a comfort in knowing exactly how long the light will last. When night deepened, some used snuffers to preserve the leftover stub, hiding it from thieves or servants, because wax was dear and light was precious. And yet, even the poorest found ways to make do, soaking rushes in grease, or fashioning tiny lamps from nutshells. The glow might be dim, but it was theirs, and that made it enough. Imagine now the soft murmur of families across a city, hundreds of small flames flickering behind curtains, each one marking a separate heartbeat in the dark. History often remembers kings and wars, but in truth it was candles that held the night together. They allowed conversations to linger, ideas to be written, lullabies to be sung long after sunset. They made room for tenderness. They were witnesses to both labor and love. In the great manors, wax chandeliers dripped golden rain over polished tables. In cottages, single tapers bowed in cracked holders beside coarse bread and steaming broth. But light is democratic, it dignifies all it touches. A queen and a servant looked equally human by candlelight. Perhaps that is why it endures in our memory with such gentleness. It reveals without judgment. The candle does not glare. It listens. You can feel that even now when you light one the way, its flame wavers, as if acknowledging your breath, your presence. It's a conversation, soft and wordless, and across centuries, that dialogue shaped entire traditions. In distant monasteries, monks measured their vigils by candles. When one burned out, another was lit, the ritual as endless as devotion itself. In ports, sailors counted the hours until departure by the candles burning in taverns. In hospitals, attendants watched the dying by candlelight, so the soul might find its way in peace. Even superstition wrapped itself gently around the flame. Some believed a candle's flicker foretold visitors, or that if a wick burned too fast, rain would follow. These were not fears, but small comforts, ways of reading meaning into the glow. Candles became symbols of hope because they were fragile yet enduring. They reminded people that light need not conquer darkness. It could simply coexist with it, steady and calm. And so, through the centuries, people came to trust the flame as they trusted their own breath. You might feel that trust even now, sitting quietly, letting your gaze rest on the soft dance of light. As the wax melts, it carries the scent of all those who came before, the tallow of hunters, the beeswax of monks, the perfumes of merchants, the quiet care of mothers. It's all folded into the story of this one small flame. The candle connects you backward through unbroken generations of human stillness. And as we drift toward the next part of our journey, remember that what seems ordinary, a wick, a bit of wax, was once the most miraculous comfort we had. The candle didn't just light our nights. It taught us how to rest within them. By the 17th century, the candle had become more than light. It was etiquette, language, and theater all at once, shaping the rhythm of evenings from palace to farmhouse. And as the world slipped deeper into the age of reason, the candle kept its gentle hold on the imagination, reminding people that even logic required glow. In Paris and Amsterdam, chandeliers bloomed like frozen gardens above dining halls, each arm crowned with wax buds that trembled at every breath of music. Servants moved among them with long snuffers and tapers, tending the flames as if grooming 100 tiny horses, while outside, beggars huddled beneath the amber windows, watching warmth through glass. Light had become social currency, a sign of grace and welcome, and the art of illumination grew alongside painting and poetry. How a face looked by candlelight mattered as much as what it said. Portraitists chased that shimmer across canvas, finding softness in shadows, and lovers learned to speak quietly because the flame seemed to listen. Stay with me. The world was changing fast, but the candle refused to hurry. In the low houses of Prague or Bruges, wax was scarce and nights were long, so people invented new habits of thrift wicks braided tighter. Molds cooled slower, stubs remelted until nothing was wasted. A good candle was worth a prayer. You can picture it, a narrow kitchen, walls breathing steam, a single taper standing in a saucer of pewter, while bread rises by the hearth. The flame bends toward the dough, as if blessing it. Outside, the canal fog swallows sound, and the family eats in peace, their laughter soft as crumbs falling. The candle made the smallest rooms into sanctuaries. And then came science, peering into its mystery. In 1660, Robert Boyle watched a candle die beneath a bell jar and realized air was more than emptiness. It was food for fire and lungs alike. Later, Lavoisier named the gas oxygen, proving that what kept us alive also kept the candle alive, a quiet kinship between breath and flame. Imagine that discovery told to a crowd lit only by candles. The irony glowing in every wick. They were burning proof of life itself. Yet none of this knowledge diminished their poetry. If anything, it deepened it. The candle was now both symbol and specimen, muse and instrument, bridging faith and experiment. Students timed chemical reactions by how far the wax had sunk. Astronomers shielded their delicate lenses beneath parchment lanterns. Surgeons in cold theaters relied on rows of steady flames that hummed like bees. The light of learning was literal, and still, when lessons ended, people returned to their quiet chambers, to the one candle kept for reflection. You might imagine a scholar in a wool robe, ink on his cuffs, leaning close to reread a sentence. The flame shakes as he sighs, the wax breathes, and the night beyond his window grows kind again. That intimacy one mind, one light became the essence of modern thought. The age of enlightenment was, at heart, the age of candlelight. Across Europe, salons glittered with conversation. Voltaire, Diderot, Hume, their ideas rising with the heat of melting wax. The chandeliers smoked slightly, gilded mirrors, multiplying each spark until rooms seemed infinite. But when the guests departed, servants moved silently to snuff each wick with a conical tool. A soft hiss following every sigh of debate. Darkness reclaimed the air, and the smell of spent wax lingered like memory. In that scent the mixture of honey and smoke centuries still speak. Perhaps you've smelled it after blowing out a candle yourself, that tender ghost of light. Breathe it in now, as if it were a note of history, human effort rendered fragrant. And while great cities danced in brilliance, the countryside kept its slower rhythm. Peasants carried horn lanterns through fields, the flame muffled by thin horn plates that turned wind into amber haze. Shepherds hung lanterns from crooks to guide lambs home. Millers placed candles in windows to tell travelers the road was safe. Each light meant shelter. When winter pressed hardest, families gathered round a single candle stuck into the last apple of autumn, its sweetness mixing with smoke. The old believed that as long as the flame lasted, no spirit of cold could cross the threshold. Even now, we carry a trace of that trust when we light a candle against a storm. It's not superstition, it's inheritance. Let's turn the lamp a little lower and drift toward the ocean, where sailors used candles not only for sight, but for courage. In the holds of great wooden ships, candles burned within glass boxes, their flames rocking gently with the waves. They were forbidden in storms too dangerous, but once calm returned, crews relit them, a sign the sea had forgiven their passage. On shore, families kept candles in windows until the ship returned. Some said that if a flame guttered suddenly, a soul had been claimed by the deep. Still, people lit them anyway, because hope, like wax, is meant to burn even when it hurts. Think of that tenderness, the human need to place light between themselves and loss. The candle teaches that grief, too, can glow softly. As we near the 18th century's close, factories begin to hum, and whale oil flows from distant oceans, promising cheaper brightness. The world's nights grow wider, harsher, yet in parlors and chapels, people keep lighting candles for reasons science cannot name, for prayer, for memory, for love. In a moment you'll see how those small flames would survive the blaze of industry. But for now, rest with this image, the city dimming, the last carriage passing, a window left open to the night. Inside, a single candle waits on a desk beside an unfinished letter. Its light folds over the ink like a hand. The writer hesitates, then smiles, sealing the page with wax that drips in the shape of a star. Outside, dawn is already silvering the roofs, yet he does not snuff the candle. He lets it burn itself to sleep. So too will we, slowly, as the story continues. By the dawn of the 19th century, the candle had already lived a dozen lives, scientific, domesticant, yet it glowed with the same patience, as if it had been waiting for this quieter age to notice its beauty anew. Factories now hummed where monasteries once murmured, and the chandler's craft, once an intimate ritual of hands and scent, became an industry of steam and gears. Still, in small workshops along the Thames and the Seine, artisans stirred vats of melted wax with the same gentle rhythm as their ancestors, testing the color of the liquid by lamplight, listening to the soft hum of bubbles rising. There was a certain poetry in their persistence. Even as gaslights bloomed over city streets, they believed nothing could replace the living pulse of a flame. And they were right. For in parlors, studies, and bedrooms across the world, people continued to light candles, not for sight, but for solace. The act itself was comfort, the strike of the match, the whisper of ignition, the first glow spreading like a slow exhale. You can imagine a woman in a long gray dress, sitting before her vanity at dusk, lighting two slender tapers, while outside the city thundered with carriages and cries. In that small pool of light, she felt alone and at peace. The candle's reflection shimmered in the glass, like a companion that would never speak too loudly. Even poets of the time, weary of progress, wrote of candles as though they were the last honest stars left to touch. They burned in writing rooms and sick rooms, beside portraits of the departed, beside books of love and mourning. A candle made silence visible. It reminded the living that warmth did not need to roar. Stay with me here. You can almost hear the world slowing, a century catching its breath. Steam and soot blackened the skies, yet beneath that, homes were filled with little suns made by human hands. In 1834, Joseph Morgan invented the continuous mold, allowing candles to be poured endlessly in perfect shape, each one uniform, identical, a small miracle of patience turned into production. But even in that age of perfection, the charm remained in imperfection, the drip of wax down a holder, the faint unevenness of a hand-dipped taper. People still loved those signs of touch, perhaps because they reminded them that light was something earned, not merely switched on. In the drawing rooms of London and Boston, guests lingered beneath chandeliers trimmed with mirrors that multiplied every glow, their laughter filtered through gold. And yet, somewhere outside those rooms, a lamplighter climbed his rounds, watching candlelight fade as new globes of gas hissed to life. The candle began to retreat, but never surrender. It found refuge in the rituals that would not forget it, the church service, the vigil, the birthday, the quiet dinner between two people who wanted to see each other kindly. Each of those moments still needed flame, not brightness. There is a difference. Brightness demands attention. Flame invites presence. And so, even as cities electrified, homes kept drawers full of candles, just in case, though no one could quite say what case they meant. Perhaps they were saving a bit of the old calm. Even now, you do the same, don't you? A candle on a shelf, waiting for the night when the power flickers and silence grows large. You strike a match, and the centuries return. You can almost hear the hum of those long-ago workshops, the echo of the first breath that lit fire from stone. All of history folds itself into that single flame. The candle doesn't protest its smallness. It glows because that's enough. And as you watch it burn, you realize that time, too, melts. But not cruelly. It changes shape, softens, settles into memory. The candle's lesson is not to fight the dark, but to live within it gently. By the time the 20th century began to hum with wires and filaments, the candles seemed destined to fade into nostalgia. Yet somehow it found new purpose, not as a necessity, but as a memory, a ritual, a quiet rebellion against the relentless brightness of progress. In cities that never truly slept, candles became islands of stillness, their small flames offering what no bulb could, a sense of soul. You can imagine an early apartment in New York or Paris around 1905, the electric lamps humming faintly, their glare sharp on metal and glass, but on a wooden table, someone has lit a single beeswax candle beside a bowl of fruit. Its light spills softly over the edges, touching the skin of an apple, gilding the page of an open book. In that moment, modern life pauses. The candle is no longer needed for sight, but for feeling. Writers and lovers, painters and dreamers all return to it like a scent from childhood. It reminded them that light could be slow, that it could listen, and in an age of noise, that was a kind of salvation. During the Great War, soldiers carried stub candles in their packs, using them to read letters from home, to melt wax for sealing, to share light in trenches where darkness felt endless. Those small flames became symbols of endurance, the quiet defiance of warmth in a world gone cold. Later, in the blackouts of the Second World War, families once again gathered by candlelight, whispering stories to children, tracing shadows on walls to soften the sound of distant sirens. The candle's glow was a promise that even chaos could be survived if one kept a little light. Stay with me. We're moving gently through those years, the air heavy with smoke and hope. When peace returned, candles were lit again, not from fear, but from gratitude. People placed them in windows to welcome loved ones home, to remember those who never would. Each wick became a small monument of tenderness, and so the world entered its most luminous century, still keeping a corner of darkness for the candle. In the decades that followed, wax found itself mingled with fragrance, lavender, rose, sandalwood, turning the old flame into an art of atmosphere. No longer bound to survival, the candle became a language of mood, of emotion. Think of the 1960s, long tapers in brass holders at dinner parties, their smoke curling like jazz notes through laughter. Think of the 1970s, thick pillar candles glowing in meditation halls, the air sweet with patchouli and possibility. The candle kept evolving, just as we did, always burning at the speed of breath. When power failed in skyscrapers, when storms swept coasts, when grief silenced rooms, people still reached for that same ancient ritual: a match struck, a pause, a flame. There's comfort in continuity, isn't there? Knowing that the same gesture your ancestors made in caves and chapels still lives in your hands. The candle has become our collective heartbeat through time. Its wax molded now in glass jars, scented, colored, dressed in modern names, yet the essence unchanged. A flame leaning slightly, breathing with you. If you look closely, you'll see that every candle carries a lineage. The bees of forgotten summers, the tallow of long hunts, the oils pressed from fruit that fed empires, all distilled into something that burns purely to remind us that we, too, are light borrowed from darkness. Even in the age of screens, where blue glare floods every hour, people turn to candles, not for brightness, but for calm. They light them at baths, at vigils, at weddings, at the ends of long days when words are too many. Because the candle speaks without sound. It teaches through flicker. It knows that peace is not the absence of dark, but the trust that something gentle will endure within it. And maybe that's why, even now, the candle survives every invention. It waits quietly for the moments when we remember to slow down. So tonight, as you breathe and the room softens, imagine that you're part of this long chain of light, each flame leading to another. Through war, through wonder, through time, the candle you light now has burned in spirit for 1,000,000 nights before, and will burn again long after you sleep. As the century deepened and the world grew louder, the candle began to speak more softly, choosing its places carefully, quiet corners, moments of reflection, the pauses between songs and sentences. It was no longer the guardian of sight, but of serenity, and wherever life hurried to fast, someone would set a match to wax and invite time to slow. You can imagine the 1980s and 1990s, rooms filled with electric glow, yet softened by one gentle flame, on a coffee table, beside a book or a cup of tea, its warmth making the modern hum feel almost human again. It's strange how the smallest light can command stillness in a room. People burned candles while writing letters, studying, meditating. They burned them in cathedrals and spas, on stages and in silent bedrooms, where one flame seemed to listen better than any friend. The candle's purpose had changed, but its spirit had not. It was still the language of pause, still the slow reminder that existence is not a rush but a rhythm. In a sense, the candle became a rebellion against perfection, a flicker of impermanence in an age obsessed with constancy. When the millennium approached and screens began to bloom everywhere, people reached again for the oldest form of calm, wax and fire. Designers spoke of mood lighting, but truly they were chasing the memory of the candle, the way it turns a face softer, a wall warmer, a moment longer. Stay with me here. We're moving through a world that glows yet hungers for gentleness. Candles now came scented, wrapped in glass, labeled with words like peace, home, sanctuary. Yet beyond all the packaging, the essence was the same breath of flame, the same sigh of melting wax, the same unbroken conversation with darkness. When storms knocked out power grids, when cities paused for blackouts, people rediscovered what their ancestors had always known, that light can be handmade, that quiet can be beautiful. A candle turned necessity back into art. I sometimes think the candle survived progress because it belongs to the heart, not the eye. It asks you to be present, to sit still long enough for shadows to breathe. It's an invitation to belong to time again. Imagine lighting one now, the soft rasp of match on box, the spark leaping to wick, the first bloom of gold. In that small act, everything ancient and modern meets. Bees that once wandered through monastic gardens, chandlers stirring vats by the Thames, sailors lighting lanterns on decks, soldiers shielding tiny flames in trenches, all of them return, invisible but near. You're never alone when you light a candle. The world gathers quietly around its glow, and perhaps that's why people still light them when words fail at memorials. In cathedrals, at hospital windows, each one a message written in warmth. I remember, I hope, I wait. The candle has become a vessel of emotion more than illumination, a way of keeping faith with what can't be fixed but can still be felt. Think of a vigil after a storm, hundreds of people standing in silence, each holding a single flame that trembles like a heartbeat. The sight is ancient, almost primal, and yet completely modern. The candle knows both grief and gratitude, both farewell and welcome. It teaches us that to shine softly is still to shine. As we drift further into our age of constant brightness, where night has been chased from every corner, we might find that we need candles more than ever, not for their light, but for their shadow. The flame's gentle sway reminds us that stillness has its own kind of motion, that rest is not idleness, but grace. Tonight, if you let your room grow dim and light one candle, you'll feel it, the air changing, the walls retreating, the heart remembering something older than electricity, a rhythm as steady as breathing. Let the wick hum quietly, the wax surrender slowly, and know that you are part of a story older than cities, a story that still glows wherever someone chooses calm over hurry. The candle endures because we do. By now the candle had crossed from necessity into ritual. becoming the quiet emblem of care itself. The gesture people reached for when words seemed too loud or light too cold. It was the century of velocity, of circuits and satellites. Yet somewhere in nearly every home there waited a small cylinder of wax, poised to turn time human again. When we strike a match, we don't just summon flame, we summon memory. Imagine the scent of it, that instant sweetness mixed with smoke, the air around you folding inward as though listening. A candle changes space the way music changes silence. It turns rooms into rooms of thought. Even the hum of the refrigerator, the faint buzz of a phone, seemed to hush before it. Stay with me. The world outside can roar later. For now, we'll drift into the soft culture that grew around candles in this new millennium. Designers spoke of hygge, of cozy minimalism, of wellness. But what they really rediscovered was our oldest luxury, tranquility. Candles were sold not by hour, but by feelings, serenity, forest, rain. Amber duskened, though commerce wrapped them in glass and promise. The heart of them remained the same wick that once guided monks through stone halls. The candle never forgot its origins. It only changed its language. Couples lit them at dinners where conversation slowed into smiles. Parents lit them beside sleeping infants to mark the day's gentleness. Even those alone found comfort in watching flame lean and breathe. It kept company better than many voices. And in a time when everything is designed to last forever, a candle offers the mercy of ending. Its briefness makes beauty honest. You learn to appreciate each minute it burns because you can see the shape of its passing. That, perhaps, is why candles appear at both beginnings and farewells, weddings, birthdays, funerals, vigils. They know how to arrive and how to leave with grace. Think of that, a flame that celebrates and mourns in the same motion. It's one of the few things that can do both. And if you lean close, you'll hear how quiet it is, how confident. The candle does not shout its purpose. It glows until it's done. Around it, conversation lowers, breaths align, minds ease into rhythm. I think that's why people light candles before meditation or prayer, not because the candle changes the world, but because it changes the air enough for the world to enter more softly. You can almost feel history in the wax, the hum of bees, the warmth of hands, the patience of craft. The candle carries all of that into the present, a bridge between making and meaning. Even technology, with all its precision, hasn't truly replaced that intimacy. We still crave the trembling light that acknowledges us. When you stare at a screen, the light ignores you. When you stare at a flame, it responds, it bends, it listens. That's what makes it feel alive. And so we keep them scented, sculpted, floating, tall. Some flicker beside bathtubs, some on altars, some beside photos of those we miss. They've become our way of saying, I'm still here, I'm still human. Every time someone lights a candle, they join an unbroken chain of comfort, stretching back thousands of years. It's humbling, isn't it? The same gesture that once saved a family from the dark now calms a restless mind in a bright apartment. Different centuries, same solace. And so the candle endures in our rituals of peace, on quiet nights when rain taps the window, when the scent of wax drifts like memory, when the world feels too large but the room feels just right. That's where it belongs, between breath and thought. between day and dream. Tonight, when you finish listening, maybe you'll light one too. Watch how it steadies the room, how it speaks in silence. The candle will always wait for that moment, and it will always know what to say. In this age, when light can pour from every surface at the touch of a fingertip, it is curious that we still seek the candle, that small, trembling core of flame, whose language is slowness. Perhaps it's because the candle does not demand, it waits. It lets the world come to it instead of chasing attention. And in that patience, it mirrors something we've almost forgotten how to rest without guilt. Imagine, for a moment, that you are in a quiet cabin at the edge of a forest. Outside, snow hushes the world. Inside, a single candle burns on the table beside a steaming cup. You can hear the faint pop of the wick as it consumes itself, the small rhythm like a heartbeat, reminding you that warmth has a sound. The light pools in the wood grain, slides over the rim of the cup, climbs the walls in gold and shadow. It is a living thing, yet content to remain small. The candle has always taught that lesson, that enough is a beautiful word. Stay with me. This has been the candle's secret through every century, to show us that sufficiency is its own form of grace. Even as technology wrapped the world in permanent brightness, the candle became our way of remembering the night. Festivals still bloom with them rows of tiny flames floating on rivers in Thailand. Candles clustered on graves during Dia de Muertos in Mexico. Small votives circling statues in cathedrals, their wax pooling like whispered prayers. Across languages and continents, the act is the same. Someone lights, someone watches, someone breathes. It is one of the few gestures unchanged by progress. In that universality lies comfort. The candle belongs to everyone and to no one. It doesn't care who lights it or for what reason, it simply offers its glow. Think of how many moments it has witnessed: the birth of a child, the silence after a final breath, the promise of love spoken in low light. A candle doesn't choose joy or sorrow. It accompanies both with equal tenderness. You can feel that neutrality when you watch one burn. The flame leans with drafts, wavers, corrects itself, returns to center, like us, always adjusting to invisible winds. There's a quiet resilience in that motion, a reminder that balance isn't stillness, but continual grace. And so, while the world invents new ways to conquer darkness, the candle reminds us there's value in befriending it. Artists and monks, writers and wanderers, they've all known this. You might remember a line written in the margins of history: better to light one candle than curse the dark. Simple but eternal, that proverb has crossed empires and revolutions, carried by mouths and hearts that refused despair. To light a candle is to declare trust in the gentle. It is to say, I will not let absence win. Perhaps that's why, in modern cities buzzing with screens, we still line windows with candles during holidays. We still set them before photographs of those gone. We still let them melt beside bathtubs as water cools. It's not nostalgia, it's instinct. The candle's light is the speed of thought, the pace of remembering, the glow that lets the mind loosen its grip. And as you sit with this image, the candle, in the cabin, the snow beyond, the world hushed, you might feel a kind of kinship with every person who has ever sought peace at the edge of a small flame. The candle's warmth is the same warmth that once gathered families in caves. the same that guided travelers through deserts, the same that will one day comfort someone yet unborn. That is its quiet miracle. It bridges centuries without ever moving. You light it, it lives, it ends, and yet it returns. Light is the oldest traveler, always finding its way home. So let this chapter close with that thought. No matter how bright the world becomes, the truest comfort will always come from something small, steady, and near. The candle will wait for us, as it always has, breathing its golden patience into the dark. Every era has believed it was the final keeper of light, and yet the candle proves otherwise, slipping through history like a quiet messenger that refuses extinction. By the early 21st century, the candle had transformed into something beyond mere flame. It had become the symbol of all things intentional: slow mornings, mindful evenings, the gentle art of noticing. It lived on bedside tables, in yoga studios, in restaurants that promised romance through dimness, in places where calm had to be curated to be found. People once again sought the warmth of its simplicity, turning off their screens for a few minutes just to watch fire behave like thought wandering, returning, never quite still. The candle's presence was a sigh in material form. It offered the same reassurance as a familiar scent, or the rhythm of waves at night. Imagine yourself in a quiet apartment above a city. Traffic hums faintly below. A radio whispers somewhere down the hall, but near you, on a low wooden shelf, a candle burns. The wax glows, translucent near the base. The wick threads itself into a small spiral of smoke, and the room breathes slower. This is the language of calm that no technology can replicate. And while electric light paints evenly, the candle paints in motion, every flicker reshaping shadows, every tremor altering the story of the room. That's why painters still return to it, why filmmakers chase that elusive gold that no bulb can mimic. The candle's light is human light, imperfect, tender, alive. Stay with me. We'll drift through the modern world and see how old light still guides it. In churches and temples, the candle remains a prayer's companion. In homes, it becomes a meditation. In the silent hours of grief, it stands watch like a loyal friend. Even science, which once studied its chemistry, now studies its comfort psychologists, noting how the sight of a steady flame can slow the heart, steady the breath, quiet the mind. The candle has become therapy for the soul without pretense. It doesn't heal by doing. It heals by being. You can feel that truth in your own body if you let your gaze rest on the flame long enough. Thought fades, tension loosens, the present expands. This was always its gift. The ancients didn't know words like mindfulness or serotonin, but they understood the feeling of peace by firelight. We've merely rediscovered what they never forgot. And in rediscovering it, we've also come to see how fragility itself can be beautiful. A candle burns toward its end, and we call it graceful. We know it will vanish, but we still find it lovely while it lasts. There's wisdom in thine invitation to live as the candle does, unafraid of melting, certain that warmth matters more than endurance. Perhaps that's why candles appear at moments we call sacred, even when we no longer use that word: birthdays, weddings, anniversaries, moments when we want to slow time long enough to see it passing. A single flame can hold a room of hearts together, and when we blow it out, we don't feel loss. we feel closure. The smoke curls upward, carrying something invisible yet complete. The candle teaches us how to end softly. Outside, the century races ahead, but inside the circle of its light, there is stillness enough to remember who we are. You may find yourself doing that tonight, lighting one small candle before bed, watching its reflection in the window, listening to the world quiet around it. You might think of those who came before, or simply of your own breath, moving in and out like a tide. The candle doesn't need you to understand it. It only asks that you notice. And in noticing, you join the countless others who have found comfort in its modest glow. The future will invent new kinds of light, colder, faster, brighter, but none will ever speak as softly. The candle will survive them all, not in factories or grids, but in the human habit of seeking gentleness before sleep. If you look closely, every candle tells a biography written in wax, the tilt of its wick, the pattern of its melt, the way it remembers drafts in the air like echoes of a conversation. No two flames ever behave the same, just as no two nights ever hold the same quiet. By the time our century unfolded into its restless brightness, the candle had become a paradox, an ancient tool turned luxury, an object from the age of shadow thriving in an age of glare. Yet perhaps that was its cleverness all along, to wait until we grew weary of perfection, and then remind us that peace was always within reach. In homes across the world, the candle reclaimed its place not on altars, but on kitchen counters and bedside tables, whispering the same truth it had whispered for millennia, that stillness is a form of light. You can imagine a small house by the sea, waves shivering beyond the window, and a single candle flickering near a stack of unread letters. Someone sits nearby, tracing the folds of an envelope, feeling both the distance and the nearness of another life. The flame wavers, as if listening, the air scented faintly of salt and wax. Outside, a gull cries, and the sound feels ancient. This is how the candle works. It invites the world to slow until everything becomes tender again. Stay with me. In a moment, you'll see how its patience is not just beauty, but philosophy. The candle's burn is a lesson in balance. Too little air, and it dies. Too much, and it thrashes. It lives only by rhythm, the same rhythm that governs tides and sleep and love. That's why its light feels familiar. It moves the way our hearts do, expanding and contracting. Even its fragility comforts us, because it shows how delicacy can endure. When people speak of being grounded, they are really describing what the candle has always known, that warmth needs limits to exist, that the glow of a flame depends on the edge of the dark surrounding it. Perhaps that is why we keep returning to it when everything else feels too much. Think of a power outage, a storm rattling windows, the sudden silence when machines stop. In that pause, someone lights a candle, and the room becomes human again. The light makes shadows of our fear, but in doing so, tames it. There's a deep kindness in that transformation. The candle does not fight darkness. It befriends it, gives it shape, teaches us that not every unknown must be banished, some can be embraced. This small philosophy glows in every tradition, where candles mark time, the menorah, the Advent wreath, the vigil, the shrine. Each flame counts not days, but meanings. And though faiths may differ, the gesture is the same. Hand to match, match to wick, breath to light. That continuity is its own quiet miracle. You might remember lighting a candle for someone, or having one lit for you, and how the act said more than words could. The candle communicates through calm. Its vocabulary is patience, its grammar, grace. It reminds us that illumination begins small and grows by sharing. In medieval villages, people carried flame from house to house at dusk. In our time, we share its image pictures of candlelight on screens, digital reminders of what we still long for. Even that, somehow, keeps the chain unbroken. For the candle is not only an object, but a gesture of faith, of memory, of care. And care, unlike technology, is infinite in repetition. Picture again that seaside house. The candle burns low, the wax forming a pale lake. The person at the table finally folds the letter, blows softly, and watches the smoke spiral upward, fading into dusk. For a breath, the world seems perfectly still, as though the candle's ending had gathered every sound into quiet acceptance. That is the candle's final gift, not just light, but closure. It knows how to leave without leaving loss behind. And when morning comes, the stub of wax remains a small relic of calm, waiting to remind whoever wakes that peace was here once, and could be again tonight. The candle has always been a witness to the quiet parts of history. Those moments too soft to make it into books, but powerful enough to shape how people felt when the world turned slow. In the centuries of engines and algorithms, it might seem impossible that such a fragile thing could still matter. Yet, every night, somewhere, someone lights a wick, and the ancient rhythm begins again. You can imagine it, a city apartment, high above restless streets, windows glowing with a million electric stars, and amid it all, one small flame breathing its patient gold. The person who lit it doesn't need to name why. They just know that something in the air has to slow before sleep arrives. The candle grants permission to pause. Its glow curls gently over the rim of a glass jar, making ordinary walls appear older, kinder. And in that transformation, history continues, not in grand gestures, but in human ones. The candle's story, if you trace it carefully, is a map of comfort itself, how people have carried peace through time. Stay with me. We'll walk backward a little. In every age, the candle has filled the same small silence. The monk in a cell reading prayers, the sailor waiting for dawn, the mother humming to a child. All of them leaned toward the same fragile glow, trusting that its light would last just long enough. That trust is its own form of faith, one that doesn't need names or promises. Even now, we feel it. When storms shut down the grid, when news overwhelms, when loneliness crowds the room, a candle steadies the world again. You can watch its flame and almost hear your heartbeat answer. It's the language of reassurance written in warmth. And though we live in the brightest century, we still crave that conversation. The candle is honest. It cannot pretend to be endless. It burns as long as it can, and then it ends gracefully. Perhaps that's why we find it soothing. It reminds us that impermanence can be gentle. The wax melts without protest. The flame bows. The smoke writes a brief poem in the air, and the room holds a silence that feels like peace. That pattern, repeated across thousands of years, is one of the few constants humanity has left. Think of how many hands have repeated it, striking flint, lighting tapers, guarding the flame from wind. Each gesture an echo, each flame a translation of the same need to feel safe inside the dark. In this way, the candle is not just an artifact of light, but of empathy. It's what people create when they want warmth for others as well as for themselves. And even in modern rituals, that spirit endures. Weddings still begin with unity candles, funerals with remembrance candles, holidays with rows of small flames that count down the passage of hope. We light them not because we lack light, but because we seek meaning. The candle makes time visible. You can watch it passing and feel okay about it. The gentle shrink of wax tells you that endings are part of beauty. The more the candle gives, the more it glows. It's an idea that no machine could have taught us, only this quiet teacher of centuries could. Picture now an evening somewhere far from cities, a wooden cabin, a storm outside. Inside, someone reads beside a candle, the pages turning like slow breaths. Each rustle of paper folds into the whisper of wax. When they close the book, they sit in the silence, watching the flame lean, listening to rain tap against the roof. That stillness is the essence of all the candle has ever promised. It doesn't ask for attention, only presence. It doesn't chase darkness away, it softens it into gentleness. And when the flame finally sighs and disappears, it leaves behind a kind of glow inside you, a reminder that peace was here, real and reachable. The candle's work is never to last, but to teach us, again and again, that light can be brief and still complete. There is a kind of kindness that only light can express, and among all the forms it takes, the candle remains the gentlest. Long after its practical purpose has faded, it continues to serve the heart. It appears when we celebrate, when we remember, when we want to say something tender without sound. A candle's language is patience. It waits for us to notice what we already feel. Imagine a quiet kitchen in the hour before dawn. The sky outside is colorless. The world between sleeps, and on the table a single candle burns beside a cup that still steams. Its light touches the edge of a loaf of bread, a folded cloth, a hand resting in thought. No hurry lives there. In that moment, the candle is time itself, learning to breathe slowly. The person sitting there might be you, might be anyone who has ever sought calm before the day begins. Stay with me. This is where the candle's meaning deepens. Throughout history, its light has been a threshold, something that stands between what was and what will be. At dusk, it marks the shift from labor to rest. At dawn, it marks the courage to begin again. That rhythm has shaped centuries of human life, unseen but constant. And though we may not notice it now, our bodies still understand it. The soft glow signals to the mind that it is safe to settle, to dream, to remember. In the monasteries of the past, monks lit candles not only to read scripture, but to guide the soul from one prayer to the next. Each flame was a bridge between breaths, and that same quiet faith, stripped of name or dogma, survives every time someone lights a candle in silence. It's a ritual written in instinct. You don't have to think about it. You just light, and something inside you exhales. Perhaps that's why artists still fill their studios with candlelight when the world outside feels too sharp. The flicker invites imperfection, allows shadows to participate in beauty. Painters once used candles to study chiaroscuro, the play of dark and light. But I think they were also studying the heart, the way grief and peace can coexist, the way loss can still glow. You can see that duality in every flame, the core steady, the edges dancing. Life itself behaves that way, and so the candle continues to teach us without a voice. It burns not to illuminate the room, but to reveal our attention. Every gesture around it slows, the pour of tea, the turn of a page, the inhale before a thought. It turns the ordinary into ritual simply by being witnessed. That is its quiet magic. Even in modern times, when we light candles for ceremonies or for rest, what we're really doing is practicing presence. The candle brings us back to now. Think of the way it steadies a dinner between two people who love each other, or how it softens a moment of solitude into peace instead of loneliness. The candle's light carries no judgment. It holds everything gently, like hands cupped around warmth. And perhaps the greatest truth it shows us is that the world's harshness has always been temporary. Darkness returns, yes, but so does light, and neither stays forever. The candle reminds us to be kind while we burn. When you see wax pooling at its base, that slow surrender, you understand something about grace. To give completely, without noise or pride, is the purest form of beauty. The candle does this effortlessly, night after night, century after century. Even when it dies, it leaves fragrance. Memory.com. The smoke curls upward like a final word the air already knows. And so, as you sit with this story, let yourself feel the candle's lesson settling into you. You don't have to chase the light. It will come when you make room for stillness. The candle knows this, and now, perhaps, so do you. If you've ever watched a candle through an entire night, you'll know it becomes something more than light. It turns into a kind of companion, quiet, loyal, content simply to exist beside you. You begin to understand why people through the centuries trusted it with their most private hours. When the world outside fades to shadow and sound thins to almost nothing, the candle remains, breathing its small, steady fire into the dark. It doesn't judge what you think or what you feel. It listens. The ancients called fire divine because it seemed alive, but the candle made divinity domestic, a manageable miracle that could sit on a table and illuminate thought. In that humble glow, philosophers wrote treatises, lovers confessed in ink, and poets composed their midnight hymns. The candle, always patient, kept their secrets. Even now, the same magic lingers. Imagine a quiet desk at midnight, papers scattered, a notebook half filled, the window open to the murmur of distant rain. You lean closer to the flame, watching it tremble like breath, and the room feels smaller in the gentlest way. The candle gathers space into comfort. Stay with me here. This has always been its truest talent, to turn emptiness into sanctuary. When the first chandlers dipped wicks into tallow, they weren't just crafting tools. They were shaping the texture of evenings. Those early flames colored the walls of cottages and castles alike, and through their flicker, humanity discovered introspection. You can almost picture it, a peasant mending clothes by a single taper, a scholar translating texts by another, both bathed in the same gold, both equally close to wonder. That is the democracy of light. Centuries later, when electricity conquered darkness, it could not conquer intimacy. The candle retained that, quietly, like a secret inheritance, passed hand to hand. And in our own age of neon, of pixels, of ceaseless illumination, you can see it in how people gather around it at dinners or ceremonies. They lean inward, voices lower, gestures soften. The candle's circle of glow creates community without effort. It doesn't divide space, it enfolds it. That's why the flame has survived empires and revolutions. It speaks the universal language of gentleness. Even in grief, its presence consoles. During vigils, hundreds of small flames trembling together look like stars come down to earth. Each one says the same simple thing: you are not alone. Perhaps that's the candle's most profound lesson. Not illumination, but companionship. It reminds us that warmth shared is warmth multiplied. Think of that when you next light one. The wax you ignite was once liquid sunlight, drawn from plants or bees, stored patiently until this moment. To burn, it is to release summer back into the room. In that sense, the candle teaches recycling of spirit. Nothing is truly lost. Everything transforms. Watch how the wax feeds the wick, how the flame gives back scent and glow. It is a perfect loop of generosity. And when the candle finally shortens to a stub, you don't mourn it to thank it. It has completed its purpose without regret. That quiet acceptance is something we all might learn from. Even the smoke that rises after extinction seems to bless the air. For a few seconds it drifts, silver and soft, then fades into the same darkness that once seemed threatening but now feels kind. The candle has shown us that the dark was never the enemy. It was the backdrop against which light could mean something. Perhaps that's why, after thousands of years, we still light them, not out of need, but out of gratitude. We know, somewhere deep and wordless, that the small flame is our oldest friend. And tonight, as you imagine that little glow beside your own thoughts, let it remind you that calm doesn't have to be Sautite, can simply be allowed. The candle doesn't search for quiet. It creates it, one breath at a time. There is something almost musical about the way a candle fills a room, not in sound, but in rhythm. It begins with a spark, a soft intake of breath, then steadies into its own quiet tempo, flickering in time with the slow pulse of the heart. You notice how the flame sways when you exhale, how it straightens again as the air stills, and suddenly the space feels alive with the most delicate conversation. Perhaps that's why, through centuries, the candle has been the companion of reflection. It listens better than silence itself. Imagine a small library, late in the evening. The books hold their breath, the window glows faintly with the moon, and in the center of it all, a single candle burns. It sent a faint trace of beeswax and dust. You sit near it, tracing the edges of a forgotten photograph, and time begins to loosen. The flame draws your attention not by brightness, but by movement, a subtle reminder that constancy can exist within change. The candle flickers, yet never truly wavers. Stay with me. There's a kind of wisdom in that. Across cultures, the candle has always symbolized the soul, for this very reason: alive, delicate, persistent. In Buddhist temples, rows of butter lamps shimmer before statues, each one an offering of clarity. In Christian chapels, votive candles kneel in their holders, like prayers made visible. In homes from India to Iceland, people light them during celebrations and storms alike, calling warmth into the room as though inviting an old friend to dinner. What unites all these gestures is reverence. not for the flame itself, but for what it represents, the human ability to kindle light again and again, no matter how many times the dark returns. The candle's story has always been ours, told in wax instead of words. Every era remakes it in its image. The Victorians wrapped it in romance. The modern world sells it as calm. But beneath each surface, the meaning stays the need for something small and steady to remind us we belong. Watch the candle for a while, and you begin to see how it mirrors the heart's endurance. The outer edges of the flame shimmer and vanish, yet the center remains unwavering, blue and calm. That's us, perhaps learning to hold peace even when life trembles around us. And when the wax begins to pool and glisten, it looks almost like time melting into understanding. There's poetry in that surrender. The candle doesn't cling to its form. It transforms to fulfill its purpose. Maybe that's why we find comfort in it. It gives completely and does not complain. When people talk about selflessness, they could just as easily be describing the nature of fire. You can feel that kindness even now, can't you? Sitting there, imagining the glow on your hands, the way the shadows shift across your face. The candle doesn't just light a room, it shapes how you breathe. It asks nothing, offers everything. And when it finally shortens to a stub, the ending feels natural, right? You might even smile as you snuff it, watching the smoke curl like a small departing spirit. Because you understand that peace is not something to hold, but to feel and release. The candle has shown you this all along. Across time, from temples to trenches, from lovers' tables to sick rooms, it has carried the same soft message. This moment is enough. You don't need to chase tomorrow while the flame still burns. Sit within it. Let the light rest against your thoughts. When you do, history feels close. Millennia of nights linked by this same gesture, this same glow. The candle has never aged. It has only deepened. Its warmth is the memory of every human who ever sought comfort in the dark. And tonight, as its imagined flame flickers before you, let that memory be your quiet companion. The candle will stay as long as you need it, humming its silent song of patience and peace. If the story of the candle has taught us anything, it is that light, to be meaningful, does not need to last forever, only needs to arrive, to bloom briefly in darkness, to remind us that warmth has always been within reach. And now, as our long journey draws to its close, imagine that you are sitting in a room that feels both ancient and familiar. The walls are pale with memory. The air carries the faint perfume of wax and dust. And on the table before you, a single candle burns. Outside, the night is deep and kind. Stars muffled by mist. The wind a slow exhale through the trees. Inside, the flame leans gently toward you, as though it knows this moment matters. The candle has lived 1,000 lives, guiding pilgrims, lighting poets' pages, guarding soldiers in their tents, blessing weddings and mourning wake sand through every life. Its message has remained the same. Even small light is sacred. Stay with me. We'll let this final flame speak a little longer. You can watch how it steadies itself after each flicker, how it hums almost imperceptibly, how the pool of melted wax reflects its twin like a golden mirror. It is a humble radiance, but within it are centuries of human breath. Every hand that ever shielded a flame from wind, every wish whispered into smoke. The candle's glow is a chorus of persistence, and perhaps as you sit with it now, you can feel the presence of all those who came before, gathered invisibly around this same soft brightness. The candle, after all, belongs to everyone who has ever hoped for peace. It is the quiet democracy of warmth. In this modern age, where light is cheap and constant, the candle endures precisely because it asks for attention. It insists that you slow down, that you see light as gift, not background. It invites intimacy with the world again. And when you accept, when you sit long enough for shadows to soften and thoughts to drift, you understand that the candle's purpose was never to defeat the dark, but to make it gentle. Its flame doesn't chase night away. It teaches the night how to glow. In that lesson lies everything human: how to burn kindly, how to fade gracefully, how to leave beauty behind. The candle's smoke rises like memory, like breath returning to sky. And in it you can almost read the script of time birth, warmth, rest, silence. That is the rhythm we all share. Even as our world fills with light too loud to notice itself, there will always be candles at dinners, in temples, on windowsills whispering the same secret, that softness is strength. And so this history, though quiet, continues beyond this page, in every match struck gently, in every flame cupped from wind. Tonight, before you sleep, you might light one yourself, not for ceremony, but for company. Let its glow breathe beside you while you listen to the slow hush of the world settling. Watch how the flame bends, how it steadies, how it becomes almost still as your heartbeat slows to match it. That shared rhythm is older than language, older than fear. You are safe here, wrapped in the patience of light. The candle will keep its watch while you drift, its whisper the same one it has spoken for 1,000 nights. Rest now, the dark is kind, the flame will stay until morning.